You don't know the real power of loyalty until you see a K9 in action. Thor, the German shepherd, stood frozen at the foot of the hospital bed, his amber eyes fixed on Emily Carter, the SEAL captain's daughter. He growled softly, a low, guttural sound that sent chills down the spine of everyone nearby. The medical staff hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Emily's vitals were weak, and every moment mattered, but Thor refused to let anyone near her. They tried, but each time, his powerful frame blocked their way. His loyalty was unwavering, his mission clear: protect Emily at all costs. Captain Jack Carter, her father, stood in the doorway, torn between concern for his daughter and the strange, almost sacred bond between his dog and her. The tension was palpable. No one dared to approach, yet time was running out. Then Sarah Miller, the nurse, stepped forward. She'd seen Thor before, during her days volunteering at a veteran's shelter. She had always admired the dog's strength, his loyalty, but now, standing in front of him, she knew she needed to do something no one else dared. "Thor," she whispered, stepping into his line of sight. He paused, his head tilting slightly. "I know you." Her voice was calm, but her words carried weight. The dog's growl softened, his body still tense, but there was recognition in his gaze. She stepped closer, her hand reaching out. "It's me, Sarah," she continued, her voice steady. "You remember me." She spoke again, this time saying something that only the two of them understood. A simple sequence of words, a call sign. Thor's ears twitched, his eyes flickering with something more than instinct. For a moment, it seemed like time stood still. Then, with a soft sigh, Thor backed away just enough to let Sarah approach. The room held its breath. Emily's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, but the sound of her heartbeat steadied, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Jack saw hope. Sarah knelt beside Emily, her fingers lightly brushing her wrist, feeling for a pulse. Thor remained by her side, his body poised, ever watchful. "It's going to be okay," Sarah murmured, more to herself than anyone else, though the words felt heavy with meaning. Captain Carter watched in disbelief. How did Sarah know the dog's call sign? How did she manage to connect with Thor in a way no one else could? His mind raced, but all he could do was wait. As Sarah continued her work, Thor lay down next to Emily, his head resting on his paws, eyes never leaving the girl he'd sworn to protect. Jack stepped forward, the weight of his military training now fading into the background as he realized that the bond between his daughter, his dog, and Sarah was something far greater than he could have imagined. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside that small room, a quiet miracle began to unfold. The storm outside raged on, its fierce winds howling against the hospital windows, but inside, a strange calm had settled over the room. Sarah gently checked Emily's pulse again, her fingers brushing softly against the girl's wrist. Thor, the K9, lay beside her, his amber eyes never leaving Emily's face. Jack stood at the doorway, watching in disbelief as the nurse, whom he had only known for a brief moment, connected with his daughter's protector in a way he couldn't explain. The bond between Sarah and Thor was undeniable, something deeper than just a nurse and a dog. It was like an unspoken understanding that neither of them had voiced, yet was so clearly felt. "Sarah," Jack finally spoke, his voice quiet, a mix of gratitude and confusion. "How did you know Thor's call sign?" Sarah looked up from Emily, her expression soft, but there was a hint of something hidden beneath her calm demeanor. She hesitated for a moment, then answered, "I volunteered with a few veterans a while back. Thor was with the SEAL team. He saved lives. He's not just a dog. He's family to them." Jack felt a weight lift off his chest. The realization that Sarah knew something so personal about Thor, something only those close to the SEAL community would understand, gave him a sense of peace. But the mystery still lingered. What had Thor seen in Emily? Why had he refused to let anyone near her? And why had Sarah been the one who could approach? Jack's mind raced, but he couldn't focus on it now. Emily's slow, steady breathing was all that mattered. "She's stable," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "It looks like she's responding to the treatment. I think she's going to be okay. Jack breathed a sigh of relief, but the tension in the room didn't fully dissipate. He glanced at Thor, who still lay at Emily's side, guarding her with an unspoken promise of protection. "Thank you," Jack said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." Sarah shook her head, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "You don't need to," she replied softly. "Thor's done his part. He's always going to protect her. And now it's our turn." Jack nodded, his eyes lingering on his daughter's peaceful face. In that moment, he knew that Thor's loyalty had saved Emily's life. But there was something more, something about Sarah, her calm presence, and her understanding of the bond between man and dog that made Jack feel like everything was going to be all right. Outside, the storm began to quiet, the winds dying down as the night wore on. In the hospital room, however, a quiet miracle had unfolded. Emily was still, but safe, and Thor lay protectively by her side, guarding her as he always would. Sarah stood back, watching the two of them, feeling the weight of the responsibility she had just taken on. A bond had been formed, not just between the SEAL captain's daughter and his dog, but between all of them. A bond of trust, of loyalty, and of the unspoken understanding that, no matter what, they would always be there for each other. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp, still air that filled the room with a strange peace. The first light of dawn filtered softly through the hospital blinds, casting a gentle glow over Emily's pale face. Her breathing was steady, but her eyes remained closed. Jack sat by her side, his fingers lightly tracing the edge of her hand, his thoughts still racing. His mind kept returning to Thor. The dog had always been a loyal companion, but now, the bond between them seemed almost supernatural. Sarah had been right. Thor wasn't just a dog. He was something more, something deeply connected to the SEAL world, a world Jack knew all too well. But what did it mean that Thor had reacted so fiercely to protect Emily? Why had the dog singled her out? As Jack sat in silence, contemplating, Thor remained at Emily's side, his watchful gaze never wavering. The canine's body was tense, but his eyes showed a deep sense of duty, as if guarding her was his only mission in life. Sarah, who had been working at the nurse's station, came over quietly. She didn't say a word, but simply placed a cup of coffee in Jack's hand. "She's stable," Sarah said softly, her voice filled with reassurance. "I think she's going to be okay, but she needs rest. So do you." Jack nodded, taking a sip of the coffee. It was bitter, but it grounded him, reminding him that despite the chaos, he needed to stay strong for his daughter. "What happened last night?" he asked, looking up at Sarah. "Why did Thor protect her like that?" Sarah sat down next to Jack, her gaze shifting to the dog before she spoke. "Thor's trained to protect, especially in dangerous situations. But there's something about Emily. It's more than just instinct. When he was with the SEALs, he became more than a weapon. He became part of the team, part of the family." She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "I think he sensed something in her, something he was trained to protect. Maybe it's because she's connected to that world too." Jack frowned, trying to piece everything together. "You mean because she's my daughter?" Sarah nodded slowly. "Yes, but not just that. Thor's instincts are sharp, and when he sensed her vulnerability last night, he went into full protection mode. It's as if he knew she was someone worth guarding, someone who needed him." Jack looked at Emily, his heart swelling with both pride and concern. Emily had always been strong, independent, just like her mother. But now, she seemed fragile, vulnerable in a way he had never seen before. "I don't understand," he murmured. "I don't know how any of this works." Sarah offered him a warm smile. "Sometimes we don't need to understand. We just need to trust that everything happens for a reason." Jack looked down at Thor, who was still lying at Emily's side. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick. "With gratitude. I don't know what I would have done without you." Sarah stood and placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "Thor's always been a protector. He'll always be here for Emily. And for you too." Jack didn't say anything, but he felt a sense of peace settle over him. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but with Thor by their side, he had hope. Hope that, no matter what, they would get through it together. As the days passed, Emily's condition improved, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play. Thor remained at her side, never leaving her alone, his watchful eyes always alert, even while he slept. Jack sat beside her, day after day, the sound of her steady breathing offering a small comfort. But it was the quiet moments, when Sarah came in to check on Emily, that Jack began to notice something that seemed even more important. Sarah's presence was always calm, almost like she was the bridge between their world and Thor's. She moved with a quiet grace, never hurried, always knowing the right thing to do. It was like she had a secret connection to the dog, something Jack couldn't quite understand. One evening, after another long day of recovery, Jack decided to ask her. "Sarah," he began, his voice hesitant, "what exactly is it that you know about Thor? It's not just that you're a good nurse. There's something more." Sarah turned to him, her eyes soft, but there was a depth to her gaze that made Jack feel like she was seeing straight through him. "Thor and I," she said quietly, "we've been through a lot together. Not just as a dog and handler, but as partners. There's a bond that's built over time, over shared experiences. He's not just a dog to me, Jack. He's family. And when I met Emily, I knew he'd protect her, just like he protected the men he worked with." Jack looked down at Thor, who was lying on the floor at Emily's feet, his eyes closed but his body still tense. It was clear that the dog wasn't just a protector. He was a sentinel, watching over Emily like he had been trained to do. "But why her?" Jack asked, his voice thick with confusion. "Why does he seem so drawn to her? It's like he knew she needed him." Sarah glanced at Thor, her lips curling into a small smile. "Sometimes, Jack, animals can sense things that we can't. They know when someone's heart is vulnerable, when they need someone to trust. Thor has always been able to read people like that. And when he met Emily, he knew she needed him. He's not just protecting her body, he's guarding her soul." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He had never seen Thor like this, so gentle, so aware of Emily's needs. It was like the dog was more than just an animal. He was a guardian, a protector, a link to something greater than Jack had ever understood. Sarah stood up, walking over to Emily's side, checking her vitals once more. "She's going to make it," Sarah said, her voice filled with certainty. "But it's not just the medicine that's helping her. It's the love, the protection, the bond that's formed here. Thor's part of that, and so are you." Jack stood, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "For everything you've done, for Emily, for us. You and Thor, you've saved her life." Sarah smiled softly, her eyes twinkling with warmth. "It's not just me, Jack," she said. "It's all of us working together. You've got a good team here." Jack glanced down at Thor, who was now curled up next to Emily, his breathing steady and deep. For the first time since the storm, Jack felt a true sense of peace. He had never believed in miracles before, but as he looked at the dog, the nurse, and his daughter, he realized that maybe, just maybe, there was something beyond what he could see, something he was beginning to understand. Thor had saved Emily, yes, but perhaps in some way the dog had saved them all. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. Jack spent every moment by her side, never leaving the hospital, watching as his daughter slowly regained her strength. Thor was always there too, never straying far from Emily's bed. The dog had become a constant presence, his loyalty unwavering. Sarah, too, had become a part of their lives, her quiet support and knowledge helping them navigate through this unexpected journey. There were moments late, at night, when Jack would find himself alone in the room with Thor and Emily, his thoughts drifting back to the bond between them. It was as if Thor understood something deeper, something beyond just protecting Emily physically. There was a connection there, something Jack couldn't fully explain, but felt in the way Thor watched over her, the way he stayed close, as though he were guarding her very soul. Jack had spent years in the military, seen countless battles and victories, but nothing had prepared him for the quiet heroism of a dog like Thor. It wasn't just about strength or training, it was about heart, and Thor had plenty of that. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the hospital room. Sarah walked in with a soft smile. "She's doing well," she said, checking Emily's vitals with the practiced ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. "I think we're almost there." Jack looked up, his face tired but filled with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've saved her life." Sarah shook her head, her eyes kind. "It wasn't just me, Jack. It was Thor, too. And Emily's strength. She's stronger than you realize." Jack nodded, his eyes flicking to his daughter, who was now awake and staring at him with a faint smile. He couldn't believe how far she had come in such a short time. The storm that had nearly taken her life had now passed, and though the scars of the ordeal would remain, Jack knew they had all made it through something extraordinary. "You're right," Jack said quietly. "She's stronger than I ever knew." Just then, Emily's voice broke the silence. "Dad," she whispered, her throat still raw but her smile genuine. "I am okay." Jack's heart swelled with relief as he took her hand in his. Thor, who had been lying at the foot of the bed, let out a soft whine, as if he, too, was relieved. He walked over to Emily, nuzzling her gently, his eyes meeting hers. Emily smiled at the dog, her fingers brushing through his fur. "Thank you, Thor," she said softly. "I knew you'd be here." Jack watched the scene unfold before him, his daughter, recovering, and the dog who had been her. Protect her from the very beginning. He realized in that moment that this journey had not only saved Emily's life, but had also changed him. He had seen love, loyalty, and courage in their purest forms, and he knew that, no matter what, they were all stronger because of it. The bond between them had been forged in the most unexpected of ways, but it was unbreakable. As the days went on, Emily continued to heal, and Jack found himself looking at life through a new lens. He no longer took the small moments for granted. The quiet times with his daughter, the soft click of Thor's paws on the floor, and the gentle hum of the hospital machines became a reminder of what truly mattered. And as he looked at Emily, who was slowly regaining her strength, he knew they were all ready for whatever came next. The road ahead would be uncertain, but they would face it together, family, dog, and all. Weeks passed, and with each day, Emily grew stronger. Her laughter began to fill the room again, her smile slowly returning as she regained her sense of independence. Jack watched her, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. He had been through so much, but now, for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to believe that they were truly going to be okay. Thor, as always, remained by Emily's side, a constant presence of protection and comfort. The bond between them was undeniable, like a silent understanding that no words could explain. It wasn't just about the dog keeping her safe. It was about something deeper, something unspoken. Sarah continued to visit every day, checking on Emily and offering her gentle reassurance. Her calm demeanor had become a steady anchor for both Emily and Jack. They had come to rely on her, not just for her medical expertise, but for the way she made them feel at ease in a world that had once been so uncertain. One afternoon, as Emily sat up in bed, brushing through her hair with a small smile, Jack looked over at Sarah. "I still don't understand how you do it," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Sarah glanced at him, her expression warm. "Do what?" she asked, though she already knew what he meant. "How you and Thor, you just seem to know how to help her, how to make everything feel like it's going to be okay," Jack said, his gaze shifting to his daughter. "You've been a part of our lives in a way I never expected. I don't know what we would have done without you." Sarah smiled, a faint glimmer of something deeper in her eyes. "It's not about knowing what to do, Jack. It's about being there when someone needs you most. Thor, he's always known that. He doesn't just protect people. He connects with them in a way that's impossible to explain." Jack nodded, looking over at Thor, who was lying beside Emily, his head resting on his paws, his eyes half closed but ever watchful. It was true. There was something extraordinary about Thor, a deep, instinctual connection that went beyond just loyalty. It was a bond built on trust, understanding, and love. "I never knew a dog could be like that," Jack said, his voice soft. "He's not just a pet. He's part of our family. Sarah's eyes met his, and she nodded in agreement. He's more than just a dog, Jack. He's family. And sometimes, family doesn't have to be explained. It just is. Jack took a deep breath, his chest tightening with emotion. You're right. I think I'm starting to understand that. As the days went on, Emily's recovery became a story of its own. It wasn't just the physical healing that was happening, but something much deeper, a sense of peace and wholeness that was gradually returning to their lives. And through it all, Thor remained the steadfast protector, his presence a reminder of the strength that comes from unconditional love. Jack knew that they still had a long road ahead, but with Sarah by their side and Thor watching over them, he felt a sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. The storm had passed, and while the scars would remain, they had found their way through it, together. The days ahead might still be uncertain, but Jack was no longer afraid of what the future held. He knew, whatever came their way, they would face it as a family, united, strong, and unbreakable. As weeks passed, Jack felt the world shift beneath his feet. The hospital room, once filled with the sterile smell of medicine and the buzz of machines, had become a place of warmth, light, and recovery. Emily's strength continued to surprise him, and with each passing day, she seemed more like the daughter he had known before the storm. Thor, ever loyal, stayed close by her side, his eyes always alert, as though he could sense when she needed protection or comfort. Sarah continued her visits, each day bringing a new layer of understanding between the three of them. Jack found himself looking forward to her visits, not just for her medical expertise, but for her calm presence and the steady way she interacted with Emily and Thor. It was clear now that Sarah had become more than just a nurse. She had become a part of their family, in a way that felt both natural and necessary. One evening, as the sun set and the golden light filtered through the blinds, Jack sat in the chair next to Emily's bed, watching her smile as she played with Thor. The dog lay on the floor at her feet, his head resting on her lap, content in the peace of the moment. Jack's heart swelled with gratitude. He had been through so much, but now, watching Emily's recovery, he couldn't help but feel that the worst was behind them. "Dad," Emily said softly, her voice still a little weak, but filled with a quiet strength. "I think I'm ready to go home soon." Jack looked at her, his eyes searching hers for any sign of doubt. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Emily nodded, her smile growing wider. "I'm ready, Dad. I'm stronger now." And Thor, she trailed off, glancing at the dog, who was now looking up at her with bright, trusting eyes. "Thor will keep me safe, won't you, boy?" Thor wagged his tail in response, as if to say, "Always." Jack chuckled, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. "I think he'll keep you safe no matter what," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "But you don't have to do this alone. We'll always be here, all of us." Sarah walked into the room just then, her presence as steady as ever. "She's right," Sarah said with a soft smile. "You're both stronger than you realize. And Thor, well, he's been a protector for much longer than any of us can truly understand." Jack looked at Sarah, a question lingering in his eyes. "Do you think we're really ready for what's next?" he asked, the weight of the unknown still heavy on his shoulders. Sarah met his gaze, her expression soft, but confident. "You've been through the hardest part, and with Emily's strength, Thor's loyalty, and your love, there's nothing you can't face. You're not just surviving anymore. You're living, Jack." Jack nodded slowly, her words sinking deep into his heart. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that they could move forward, that they could heal. And as he watched Emily interact with Thor, her laughter ringing through the room like music, he realized that the journey ahead wasn't about fear. It was about hope. It was about a family, bound not by blood alone, but by love, trust, and the quiet strength they had built together. Emily reached out to Thor, her fingers brushing his fur, and the dog responded by nuzzling her hand, his eyes full of affection. Jack felt a tear slip down his cheek, a tear of pure gratitude. They had made it. They were going to be okay. And no matter what came next, they would face it together, as a family, with Thor always by their side. As the weeks moved on, the quiet rhythm of life began to settle back into their home. Emily's strength continued to grow, and with every passing day, she seemed more like herself, determined, independent, but still in need of the quiet support that had carried her through the darkest moments. Jack found solace in the small moments. The way Emily smiled at Thor when she woke up, the way the dog would nuzzle her hand in the mornings as if reassuring her that everything was going to be all right. Their bond was stronger than ever. It was clear that they had found something extraordinary in one another, a connection that no one could explain, but everyone could feel. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack sat on the porch, watching the soft golden light reflect off the lake. It had become a peaceful routine for him, sitting in the silence, letting the calm wash over him after the chaos of the past months. Thor, as always, was at his side, lying on the grass, his head resting on his paws. Emily joined him a few minutes later, sitting beside him. The cool breeze lifted her hair, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. "Dad," Emily said softly, breaking the quiet, "I've been thinking." Jack turned to look at her, a slight concern rising in his chest. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Emily hesitated for a moment, then spoke again, her voice filled with conviction. "I know I'm still recovering, but I want to do something. I want to give back. I want to help people, like you and Thor helped me." Jack felt a warmth spread through him. His daughter, so resilient, so full of life, wanted to make a difference. He had always admired her strength, but in that moment he saw something more, her heart, her desire to heal the world around her. "You already are helping, Emily," Jack said softly, his voice filled with pride. "You've already shown more courage than most people ever will." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "I want to be strong, not just for myself, but for others too. Maybe I can work with animals. Maybe I can help people like Thor helps me." Jack glanced at Thor, who was now lying next to Emily, his body relaxed but his eyes still vigilant, always ready to protect. Thor had always been more than just a dog. He had been a source of comfort, strength, and healing. He had shown them that love and loyalty could be just as powerful as medicine. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're going to do amazing things, Emily. I have no doubt about that." Emily's smile widened, and she leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting toward the lake. "It's because of Thor, you know. He's the reason I'm here today." Jack's heart tightened as he looked at his daughter, her strength and determination radiating in the evening light. "No, sweetheart," he said gently, his voice steady but filled with love. "It's because of you. You never gave up. Thor just helped you remember that." They sat together in the quiet, watching the sun disappear behind the hills. The road ahead was uncertain, but in that moment, Jack knew they had all found something precious, a bond that could never be broken. As long as they had each other, they would face whatever came next, stronger than ever. Thor lifted his head and let out a soft whine, as if sensing the peace that had settled over them. He stood, walked over to Emily, and nuzzled her hand, his eyes filled with love. Emily stroked his fur, her heart full of gratitude. In that moment, they knew they were ready for whatever came next. Together, as a family, they could handle anything. And with Thor by their side, nothing seemed impossible. As autumn began to settle in, the days grew cooler and shorter, but the warmth inside Jack's home seemed to grow with each passing day. Emily was thriving. She had found her purpose, her passion for helping others, and was slowly beginning to explore opportunities with animal therapy, just as she had dreamed. The transition from hospital bed to home was no easy feat, but with Thor at her side, she seemed unstoppable. Jack watched as his daughter, once fragile and in need of constant care, now took on a new role of teacher, mentor, and friend. She had learned so much from her journey, and now she was determined to pass that wisdom on to others. They spent their evenings together, talking about her plans for the future, while Thor lay nearby, always watchful, his presence a quiet reminder of everything they had overcome. It wasn't just Emily who had changed. Jack had too. He had learned to see life through a different lens, one that was no longer clouded by fear, but filled with hope. He found himself looking at Thor more often, grateful not just for the dog's loyalty, but for the silent lessons he had taught them both. He had seen it all, the devastation, the uncertainty, and the struggle. But now, he was witnessing the recovery, the strength, and the love that had blossomed from those dark times. One afternoon, as Jack and Emily sat in the living room, Thor curled up beside them. Emily looked over at her father, her eyes filled with a new sense of purpose. "Dad," she said, her voice strong, "I want to start volunteering with a local animal rescue organization. I think I can help, and I want to make a difference. I've got so much to give back." Jack smiled, pride swelling in his chest. "I think that's a wonderful idea," he said softly. "You've always had such a big heart, Emily. This world needs more people like you." Emily grinned, her excitement palpable. "And Thor will be with me every step of the way," she added, reaching down to scratch the dog's head. Thor lifted his eyes to her, his tail wagging ever so slightly, as if in agreement. It was clear that Thor had become more than just a dog to them. He was their anchor, their protector, and now he was part of Emily's journey to give back. Jack looked at them both, his heart full. He had never imagined that life would take him down this path, but now he couldn't imagine it any other way. Emily was not only a survivor, she was a light for others, a beacon of hope, and Thor was the one who had helped her find that light. They were a family, bound not by the trials they had faced, but by the love and loyalty that had carried them through it all. And as the seasons changed, bringing new challenges and adventures, Jack knew they would face them together. Thor, ever the faithful companion, would be by their side, guiding them with his unwavering presence, just as he always had. The future was uncertain, but with Emily's strength, Jack's unwavering support, and Thor's loyalty, there was nothing they couldn't face. They had found their way back to each other, and that was all that mattered. Together, they were unstoppable,